Test, test, test. Okay, there we go. And just a second here while I balance such and such and such. And where are we? And let's do this. Everybody's ready? Okay, welcome! My name is Michael Markowsky, and I'm going to be showing you a little bit about what I know when it comes to drawing, and maybe a few other random, totally unimportant facts about life in general. So, today what we're going to be doing is we're going to be learning how to draw fabric and folds. So this is kind of an introduction. It's going to carry on till the next episode where we really talk about different kinds of textures, like if you saw in the thumbnail, which I've already posted for the next video, is like how to make the difference between a glass and a tennis ball and a seashell and paper, and so trying to think about how we create those differences between different textures. For today though, we're going to just learn about fabric and how fabric works, because we've been drawing lots of different people and we've done a lot of superheroes because they're wearing very tight spandexy kind of outfits and not a lot of wrinkles, or we've been learning from kind of nude figures, right? But probably most people aren't drawing nude people. They're probably drawing maybe their own friends or themselves, or people they see on Facebook, or strangers on the street, and all that kind of different stuff. So, and most of the time, if you're lucky, they're wearing their clothes, right? So that's a really important part of drawing people, is learning how to draw fabric and clothes. So that's what we're going to focus on today. But before we get to that, one thing I promised everybody is to take a look and give some feedback on some of the artwork that's been sent in to me over the past few weeks. And I've been just kind of, I've lost track of time, and by the end of the class, the batteries and things are starting to die, and I don't have time to get to it. So I want to do that now, because I promised all these people who sent stuff in that I would do that. And I think this stuff is really interesting for everybody, regardless of whether this is stuff that you've done, because I know there's we've got like 4, I think, people who sent stuff in, and there are another usually 70 to 80 people who watch the episode that aren't sending stuff in. And not that you have to, but I think it's a great way to get some feedback. So, some of this might be mixed up. Okay. So I'm going to drag these over here, and I'm ready for this here. Just gonna, I need to. Just opening up a whole bunch of software in the background. Okay. So, okay. So, oops. Come on, what's going on? Okay, you got a little bit of a... Okay, so this was a drawing that Heidi sent in. I think actually at the end of the episode where we were drawing portraits of our daughter, my daughter, not Heidi and I's daughter, but my wife and I's daughter, and so she sent this in right before we were finished, which was fantastic. She was working really quickly. And I gave her a little bit of feedback, and you can see this episode about, I don't know, 3 episodes ago, talking about drawing baby faces, or baby portraits, I think it's called. And so I gave her some feedback, and then she came back with this. This is, I think she just worked on the drawing a little bit more, and this is the kind of the continuation of the drawing, which I think is fantastic. I just think a really first of all, it's, as a teacher, it's always very satisfying when people listen to you and then they actually put some of that advice into play, because it doesn't always happen. But you know, we can see, I think one of the things I was saying is to go a little bit darker and to do a little bit more shading and to be a little bit fearless with that. Like, we've already got this great photograph of this great drawing, so maybe just pushing it a little bit further, right? And I think this is the same drawing, right? Yeah, I think it is, yeah. As opposed to a new drawing of the same subject, right? And we can see, like, just so much more life in this image, and I think the hair is also a lot more effectively done. Our daughter has this very crazy, wild, thin hair, but just refuses to lay down flat, which I love. I think it's hilarious. And, it's kind of part of her nature so far as this kind of wild child. So I think she did a great job of really conveying the thinness of the hair, in that we still see the shape of her head. You know, like there's, like, even like you just looking at the camera right now, you can't really see the top of my head through my hair, right? I have relatively thick hair and my hair's darker, so my skull, well, my skull's hidden by my scalp. Hopefully you can't see my skull, but you can't see the top of my hair. You know, I can kind of go in there and in between the hair and touch my scalp, but you can't see it. Versus our daughter, you can. So she did a really nice job of maintaining the shape of the head through the hair, right? It's like seeing the, you know, if you're looking through a forest and you can see the hills going up and through. Okay. There's that, I think, on the face here, on the cheeks, that really kind of brought out a little bit more of the cheeks. Eyebrows, her eyes. So super effective drawing. I'm really, really happy that, and I think even did a little bit more work on the eyes too. Like darkening the eyelashes. And also the nose too. I like this little bit of work you put on the nose. So all of this stuff, very subtle little details, but darkening it. And, you know, this is a question that Peter asked, I think between the last few classes, just about darkening and how much should we darken things. And he was saying, you know, I'm often saying squint your eyes so that you can kind of eliminate some of the detail and see the higher contrasts. And we're going to talk a little bit about shading. We're going to do a lot of shading today. So we'll talk a little bit more about how to do that and how to push the black, because usually people are using white paper or cream color paper, so you're usually wanting to go darker, and that's usually a black pencil. So how do we get to those darker levels of gray and eventually black, different tones? Okay. So these are great. I think this is fantastic. I'm glad you did a little bit more work. Now, hopefully these aren't out of order and I've got the right things. Okay, now, trying to remember, let me just do a quick little check here to see if I can remember who sent this drawing in. So I was putting these together. Okay, so this is a drawing Janet did, who's been very generous, contributed some money to the show, so just thanks again, Janet. But this is a drawing she made towards the end of our last class when we were drawing Queen Elizabeth. And then she went and continued to work on it and did another version. And check this out. Look at that! Isn't that fantastic? So this is the first attempt, and the same artist trying it again, and look at the results. Like, we really got a wonderful likeness of Queen Elizabeth, and we were looking at the painting that Lucian Freud did of Queen Elizabeth, right? And kind of how he made the kind of lower part of her face a little bit chunkier, and I think I kind of almost feel like some of that is in the way that you've drawn her face, and I mean that in the best of ways. in this drawing has a kind of there's a power to her. Like maybe it's the thickness of her neck, maybe. But so this actually is a good place for me just to talk about the difference between staying really rigidly focused on the grid system, that basic structure of the face, you know, where we draw the oval and we divide it into quarters and we put things on the eye line. So that is, it's really important to understand that system and that structure, and you draw and draw and draw and draw enough so that eventually you don't even really need to draw those lines on there. It can be helpful every once in a while. I do it too, just to kind of locate myself. But eventually you kind of, it's sort of like riding a bicycle or something. Like the first few times, you're just really, you know, like overthinking. You're literally thinking foot forward, foot forward, foot forward, like all of the motions. And then after a while, you're not really thinking about, you know, where your feet are. You're just sort of doing it. And same sort of thing with drawing, and specifically drawing portraits, is you kind of internalize that structure, and then you make a drawing like this. So this is a, you know, I mean, it doesn't even look like the same artist did this, but what a huge leap forward. So that would be, so this is an example of kind of how, when I draw faces, I'm teaching you the basic structure so we can get into the ballpark, you know, and then once we understand that, then we have a little bit more freedom, right? And we can kind of, we don't have to be so rigid with that structure. So this is fantastic. I think, again, you know, it's even, you've also managed to capture the structure, like her head here, and the bit of a thinness of her hair. Oh, my wife is saying there's a humming. Okay, so thanks. Maybe I'm just going to stop the music and people tell me if it's the music that's humming. It could be that this, I've got this plugged in, so let me see. Let's see if that makes any difference. Sometimes power cables and audio can be a little bit troubling. So I'm just going to see if that... okay. So let me see. Just get myself back on track here. Where are we? Oh, unplugging it worked. Okay, cool. Awesome. Thanks, love. And thanks, Peter, for pointing that out. Oh, yeah, there's a few people who mentioned that. Awesome, awesome. Okay, so, great job. You know, I think a few things that you've done differently, if we kind of go back to here, is the placement of the eyes. So her eyes in real life are a little bit closer together. And if you remember, there was a really great comedy show in the 80s called Splitting Image or Spitting Image. Is anybody old enough to remember that? It was kind of like Muppet characters. It was an English, like British television show, and they were always spoofing the royal family. And often this is what they would do to the royal family characters, is put their eyes like almost touching so close together. And because that was just something that they observed as being something they could really exaggerate for those characters. So this is fantastic. Great drawing. You know, so, and just to kind of go, this is why you draw things over and over again, right? Is the more you do it, the better you're going to get. And it sounds so obvious. It's such a cliche, and I repeat it all the time, but it's because I see the results, right? So if you were to take any of your drawings and try to do them again, they would get better. So how about, I got, I think, one more. If I forget to talk about your art, please let me know. Okay, so here's another set of artworks by Ramon. So he, if you recall, he sent a portrait of me maybe about a month ago, which was excellent, a fantastic portrait that he did of me, and I was so glad he did, because I remember when I was teaching classes in person. Ramon was a student of mine, and he showed it to me. I was like, wow, that's really fantastic. And afterwards, I should have taken a photograph of it because I loved it so much. So I'm glad that he was watching and sent it in. Anyway, long story short, is he sent me an email saying he's done over 100 drawings over the past couple of months after watching these classes, and has really gotten into it. And so here's his portrait of the Queen. I mean, again, talk about fantastic. And here's a drawing he did of Frida Kahlo. These are beautiful drawings. Look at this. And David Niven, the British actor, and then of our daughter, right? Oh my goodness. So this just shows, I mean, this makes me so happy that we have students who are, you know, surpassing the teacher, right? That are taking the things that we've been talking about in class, really focusing and developing and learning and getting better and better and better, to the point where, I mean, you're doing it. I mean, everybody if you're drawing along with me and you're able to do anything we've done, especially over the past 20, 30 classes, I mean, you're doing it. I mean, there's no question at all that you guys are good artists. So any myth that you have in your mind about not being able to make art or draw, or that you're not creative, you know, can't draw a stick figure, all this kind of stuff that I hear all the time, I mean, that's just been proven to be false, right? So great artwork. I mean, goodness gracious, look at this beautiful hair, the forehead, just this beautiful rendering, right? Nice and soft around these edges. Even really nicely done teeth. These eyes are fantastic. Like, look how they just radiate energy. Beautiful. And then this is just a gorgeous drawing. Like this, the nice shading on the sides, nice and soft and yet even. I also really like, this is just a personal stylistic thing, I like these outlines. This is kind of how I draw it. I tend to have an outline. There's plenty of other people that don't like to outline. And he says in his email he wants me to be merciless in my critique of them. So he wants the most brutal feedback that I could possibly give him in order to get better. And I mean, quite honestly, I don't really have anything negative to say, Ramon, about your artwork. Unfortunately or fortunately, I don't know how you want to take that, but what on earth could I say that would need improvement? I mean, well, you know, I mean, this is not a drawing thing, but what I would suggest that you do is actually scan your artwork properly rather than just taking photographs with your phone. Like, this is one of the things I talk about with my students at Emily Carr, the university I teach at, is that it's half of the battle is making the artwork, and the other half is documenting it properly so that you can show it to people, you know, on the web, or to send to galleries and friends and all that stuff. And I mean, goodness, right today, that's really the only way people are looking at artwork, is on the computer screen, right? So I would scan these in properly. And, you know, if you don't have a scanner yet, I mean, there are a few places open where you can use a scanner, but considering the amount of great artwork you've been making, I think it really would be, I mean, you can get a scanner for 50, 60 bucks these days. So I think it would be worth scanning it properly, so we don't have some of these, you know, this vignetting around the edges. And you could start an online business doing these portraits, absolutely. So what would I honestly, Ramona, I don't really have anything to say. I mean, anything I would say would be stylistic, and your style is similar to my own style, so I don't know that, you know, I guess you could say you could go darker. You could use, like, if let's say you're using a 2B pencil, you could try going a little bit darker into some of the darker places, a little, like, I mean, you definitely, what's nice is kind of her jewelry here and how that's a little bit darker. You could think that, you know, her hair was quite dark. I would imagine this could get darker. Her eyes and maybe a little bit in her lips would get a little bit darker. Same thing with this image here, like his eyes, I could imagine being slightly darker in these pupil areas, because right now it kind of looks like maybe this is based on a photograph, so it was a photograph with a really bright flash, and so his eyes are kind of illuminated a little bit unnaturally, so they tend to, so it has that, you know, reddish quality that we would see in like a flash. You know, so, and if you were to go darker, we would probably get a little bit more darkness, maybe some of his clothes, maybe, and a little bit under here and under his nose and his eyebrows, a little bit under this ear, inside the ear. I mean, maybe on his lapel, a little bit darker, but again, that's a personal, a stylistic thing at this point. I think you're doing a fantastic job, and yeah. So that, I mean, I you know, I know you want me to be merciless, but I don't know how much more brutal I can be when you send in great artwork like that. So let me just see. So all these great comments, you could see from the people, I won't read them all right now, but you know, everyone here is just blown away by all of the artwork that all three of you have sent in. I am going to move on and start the lesson for today, since we're deep into the class already. And I think there might have been one or two more people that sent me things that I wasn't able to find right off the top of my head. So I apologize if I have missed you and I haven't talked about your work. Let me know as soon as possible, and maybe before the end of today's class, I'll get to your chatting about your work. Okay, so today what we're going to do is we're going to talk about fabric, and since I've already kind of spent almost 30 minutes talking about your great artwork, I think I'm gonna skip a little bit of the warm-up drawing, and we're just gonna go right into the lesson, and we're gonna go kind of slow, because we as I said, we're skipping the warm-up. So let me see, let's go to, okay, so and I think I'll take some of your suggestions for the robe and all that stuff that I posted earlier, and we're going to put that into the final drawing at the very end. So here's my pencils. I'm going to get, I like to use an orange or a red for my preliminary drawing, and then a blue one to go over top of it. So let's recreate the image from the thumbnail, or we'll get to it eventually, but let's see, on the, so the first thing is, let's draw a sphere. So we're going to draw a ball. So get a little ball drawn on the page, and then let's draw like a napkin, or a towel, or a cloth. Right, so, right, and if this is the case where it's going to miss, right, I'm just going to stop here. I'm going to trim it down. All right, so now I'm going to go over top of it. So we've got this ball. Alright, and then we've got this towel. And I'm even going to kind of, as I'm drawing it, just give it a few little waves in here just to kind of make it look a little less like a piece of paper and more flexible, right, as a cloth might be, right? So if we put this cloth right down on the table, you know, it doesn't lay perfectly flat, right? So we'll get to the cloth here in a little bit, but okay. So, and if you want, just to kind of, just as these little kind of where it bubbles up, just kind of add a little bit of darkness under there, just so it's pretty subtle, but it kind of looks like there's a little bit of, in fact, we could just kind of draw a few lines over here and just kind of add, you know, a little bit of shading, in fact. And these are just kind of a little bit random right now. I'm kind of imagining light is coming in from this side, and so there's kind of a slight ridge. All right. All right, so let's just do the same sort of thing with this ball, right? We'll do a little bit of rendering on the ball. And if you recall, so let's say this is where the light is hitting, right? Then we would have these kind of rings, and this goes back to like our third class, like back in, what was that, March or something, way back then, and we kind of did some gradations here. So this, let's say, is the darkest part. And so to kind of go back to Peter's comment, what I would do if you're having trouble getting darker is literally draw the darkest part first, right? It's like jumping off the deep end. Now I've got to bridge this gap. So let's say this is white. Now I've got to figure out, like, no, if I hadn't gone so dark, now I got to, like, right? So this is now going to force me to, because my darkest is really dark, to kind of make this work. So if I've gone here, and now this kind of, there's a nice blending here, but then it hits a wall where it's too dark. So now I'm just going to have to darken this out. And again, you can see as I'm shading, I'm still keeping this curve, right? So that I keep the roundness of this form. You can see I accidentally made a little bit too dark of a line. I mean, it's super subtle, but that just means that I've got to blend that. If I try to erase anything and at this point, oh my goodness, it's going to be a nightmare. Yeah, that erase, if I try to erase it, I'm not going to be able to do it properly, and it's just going to kind of shout out to the world that, look, Michael made a mistake here, or what he thought was a mistake, and then tried to hide it, and, you know, it won't go away. You know, it's like a stain that you try to clean out of your clothes, and it just ends up spreading and spreading. So once maybe there was a tiny little ketchup stain, and in the attempt to clean it, you've got now this big red blob, right? So sometimes you're just like, you know what? If I just let it go, no one will notice, right? So again, light coming from this side, and then that would probably mean we'd have quite a long shadow, which would go right off the page here. So, and maybe, just maybe while we're doing this, I'm just going to give this just a tad bit of a shadow. Right? Actually, this doesn't really make much sense because this, let's say if we draw, if this was a table behind here, right, then this ball would actually have a much wider shadow here. It may even... Okay, so there's the first step for this. So now what we're going to do is we're going to take this ball, we're going to draw it again, and then we're going to put a cloth over top of it. So let's try this again. And I'll leave a little bit, maybe I can fit another drawing down here afterwards. All right, so you can see I'm drawing this darker than I normally would, right? If I was using just a regular graphite pencil, then I wouldn't do this as dark, but I have had a few comments from people. I forgot, yours is the artwork I forgot to do, right? I just quickly, okay, so I'll remind myself that to find your artwork here, May. Okay, so here's the ball. And now we're going to drape this cloth over here. Okay, so the first thing, you can just imagine that this would just lay over top of there like that, right? Regardless of whatever angle we're looking at it. But, so this kind of looks right now like we're looking at it, the ball straight on, right? But even if we're looking at the ball from above, it's still going to do something like this. I mean, I did take some photographs we can look at to defy it a little bit. But anyway, so let's say this ball, I'm just going to add a few more, because when something is... When we take a piece of fabric, and actually we can kind of just simulate this right now. And this is a slightly smaller kind of cloth. It's got lots of wrinkles on it, but just stretch that out. So when we put this on top, there's a tension point, just like there is in a shirt, right? Where any kind of fabric, when it's being draped on something, there's a point of tension where it's kind of pulling, right? So that is your tension point right at the top, right? And then you're going to have all of these kind of lines radiating from it, just like you'd have like wrinkles under your arm, right? So these are these tension point right at the top and these lines coming off. So let's still say we're going to draw this kind of on a perspective, like a table. So I'm just going to draw what the fabric kind of would look like if there was nothing there. Like as if we took this ball and set it on top of here. But as we do that, just like, I can move this back here. We can see that it doesn't lay, I mean, we can make, let's say, one side lay really flat if we try, right? But then it's going to make, it's like a Rubik's Cube, right? You turn one side and then this side comes on. Turn this side to try to get it to lay flat, right? And the other side kind of bubbles up. So whatever you do, there's going to be these little pieces that stick up, right? So we would expect, and let's say I'll just go right into my blue here, that, and let's say I'm going to draw this. So let's say we've got this one part. This is kind of, let's say, like this line coming up and down. So I'll just kind of adjust the fabric just to make that fold happen in here. All right. That would mean that this area right here is kind of buckling up. And then these corners kind of, everything's going to kind of pull in a little bit. All right, so here's another one. Okay. Okay. So we've got these lines are kind of technically kind of aligned with the tops, right? Now the reason why I'm not drawing them all the way out here, which you could kind of get almost to the edge, is that it might actually start to look like part of the pattern of it. So it's just kind of a convention of drawing, is especially if you're doing a line drawing like this, right, is that you kind of want to create a difference between the pattern or the texture of the object itself and then what is happening to that object, right? These tension lines that are coming on top of it. So while we're right here, we can even just add a little bit of a shadow, right? So this is kind of telling me that like this, it's lifting up a little bit and there's a little bit of shadow underneath. Same thing. All right, so those tiny little areas of darkness are telling me that things are lifting up. You know, I could make this even more dramatic. Let's say I could do something like that. I could make right. If I wanted to kind of exaggerate things just a little bit. Okay, so how about let's do this again, and I'm going to do a little bit more of a soft kind of blending style of shading here rather than the line-based one. So I'm going to draw this cloth here first this time. Okay, and then I'm going to draw the ball. Okay, and then maybe this time I'm just going to use I'm just going to do a little bit of sketching with this orange. All right, so we're going to kind of replicate this image again. And this is just out of my head, my imagination, so I'm not basing it entirely on reality, which is actually kind of freeing sometimes. Is like, if I'm just drawing what I think, then, you know, it's pretty hard for it to be wrong. Let me see this here. I'm just gonna, since there's this ball under here, technically the fabric would probably, you know, is not going to be cover the same distance, right? And we'll draw from life a little bit later on here, but I just want to, before we get in there, just kind of play a little bit again. I'm calling an audible here and trying to draw a little, like, combine our practice warm-up into the real thing. Okay, I'm going to be a little bit less heavy-handed on my dark outlines here. Okay. So this time, I'm just going to kind of be a little bit more delicate with the way that I shade here. So again, we'll imagine we have a light bulb, let's say right over here. So this side is going to be much darker. So we can even, let's say, draw out where the darker areas were. So this kind of goes back to, I think Peter was saying, okay, so if this is the dark area, and we think about this again as being our ball, right? So this is going to be the brightest part, right? So that means this area right here is probably going to be amongst our darkest parts of the whole shape, right? There's going to be a little bit of light hitting here, but kind of in this zone, it's going to be darker as well. I'm going to draw this darker just so people can see what I'm talking about. All right, so this area here is going to be darker. And we might put a little bit of a shadow, well, not shadow, just a little bit of rendering right in here. Okay, and then obviously under here it's going to be really dark, so I can even just darken that in now. Okay. So now let's, I'm going to start shading this. And so, like I said, if you immediately go a little bit darker, it's going to force you to get darker. So if I put in these darker lines right now, well, now I'm kind of committed to this image. Now I've got to make this all work here. So we think about this as kind of being curves. You know, it's kind of helpful to think about it as like a sculpture. We've got to sculpt it out. I don't know how many people have ever used clay. I love using clay. I actually have some in behind me, and one of these days I'd love to teach a little bit of sculpture making. That's probably next summer before I get to that. See, I'm just kind of smoothing. So I had that kind of dark line that I put in there. I'm blending it out. I'm also just going to leave a little bit of white showing through here, because that's trying to kind of convey the thickness of the fabric, right? Right. If I was trying to draw a piece of paper, I probably wouldn't give it a little bit of a white edge on the side unless it was a stack of paper or a book or something, right? And if I go too dark, I can just kind of blend it back out. All right, so the same sort of thing here, darker. And again, this is just, I'm not looking at anything. This is just from my imagination. So if I get it a little bit wrong, it's okay. You know, you could put these wrinkles or folds in anywhere you like. Now, with this side, I could probably carry the dark edge all the way here, because I might not see the thickness of the fabric from that angle, right? So I'm kind of, you can see I'm using my pencil and going in some different directions. Sometimes I'm generally trying to avoid straight lines. Kind of these circles are kind of helpful. This is just the slow buildup of marks on the page. All right. So does that work? That's pretty good. So this version here, you know, uses the blending method of rendering versus a much more line oriented. So this would be kind of more like Tintin or cartoons, comic books. I mean, certainly, you know, Matisse would have used this. Picasso drew this way a lot. This is maybe a little bit more traditional type of way of drawing that same sort of thing. Okay, so just kind of just make sure. So go dark again. If there's anything, the lesson that, because often when I see people do this, like when they shade, like this is what I get a lot of this, right? And it's the adding the contrast between light and dark, which really gives shapes form. Or sorry, it gives shapes volume, or forms volume. Makes them appear three-dimensional. Okay, so let's carry this on to the next lesson here. So now let's talk about fabric that's draping. So let's draw a box up here. All right, so imagine this is like a towel that is tightly stretched onto the wall with tacks on all the corners, and it's really, really tight, right? So there's no sagging or anything whatsoever. And then let's say we put a couple of pins in it, and we take out the pins elsewhere, right? How would this kind of drape? And in fact, let's say it was actually a little bit longer now that I put my pins in there. So let's say we got a pin here, pin here. So now we would expect this to kind of sag in a little bit. And as it does that, this is going to kind of bow out maybe a little bit. And let's say we get and again, we could put a little bit of a shadow under here. And so where these pins are, creates tension, right? We have the fabric, the weight of the fabric is pulling on that there. And it's also pulling on that one. Okay. Let me see. Notes. Let's take this. We're going to do it a few more times. Let's do another one. So again, this box I think is just kind of helpful. Maybe we'll do another one here too. Okay, so let's imagine instead we're going to put, I'm just going to put a little sharper pencil here. Instead of putting these pins right at the edges, let's go in a little bit. Right, so instead, here's our corners. Right, so now we're going to have a much, these corners are going to sag in way more. Okay, similarly, we're going to have then each of these is going to create its own, if we start to kind of shade them in a little bit. may even have. So let's see, you know, sometimes they create a little, you know, tent-like quality here. All right, again. So I'm just going to do a little bit of extra shading here. That line is not really lining up with this, so that's a little mistake on my part, but let's see if I can kind of... So obviously now the light is coming from this direction, just the way that I'm drawing things here. Okay, and then let's do another one where it's the pins are much more like, let's say we're gonna put them like really close together. All right, so instead of this being stretched all the way out, now we're gonna have like fabric kind of folding on itself. Right, so we're gonna have all this. You could, and you, if you want, you could really kind of figure out, like, okay, all of these. It's sort of like taking a piece of string. In fact, maybe I should. Do I have a piece of string handy? Or maybe I can demonstrate it with a cloth, right? If this is the width, right? If we start kind of putting a whole bunch of folds in it, it is helpful to be a little bit mindful of all of these folds are going to stretch out to here, because you know, I think Palash posted, you know, when I asked about Robe's Spawn, who's a character I love, and Todd McFarlane went to my high school, grew up in Calgary, just like I did. That's a whole other story, but anyway, he's famous for drawing these capes with like extreme folds, right? That wouldn't, like, he might have 50 folds right in here, and if we were to try to flatten that piece of fabric out, it would go way wide, right? But let's so let's say we've got this piece of fabric here. I'm just going to draw the outer edges. All right, then we might have, and I'm just doing this randomly, right? So, you know, this is just me kind of playing around a little bit. This fabric kind of bending, twisting. Oh, battery died right now. Okay. Now, oh, because my extra battery is... Okay, give me un momento. Okay. So this fabric might kind of drape something like this, and if I just kind of quickly try to shade it in. The fun thing with fabric is it kind of takes on a bit of a life of its own, and you can really, we could really spend some, when I was in art school, we spent a lot of time drawing fabric. So I think Maybe that might come up here. Okay. Oh, and then again, a little bit of shadows underneath. Let's try a few more here. Okay, let's say we'll do another one with slightly different kinds of folds. These folds should be closer together. So let's, rather than me trying to pretend, let's just draw this again. Maybe those were the previous hooks. So just kind of like this. Here's what I was going for. Okay. And then let's say in this time, instead of this kind of curtain kind of fold, we're going to go for, let's say we have these folds like this. So we're going to put these so I'm gonna get in some of them, make this darker. Okay. And then let's do one more. Let's say we put a pin, right, one pin. We put it right in the middle. And then, so we'd kind of have, let's say these corners. And then it's going to kind of wrap down, so then we would have this is a little bit trickier, but you know, some people really want the trickier ones. So let's say this is the corner, that corner, and then we probably have, let's say, a whole bunch of these. So all of these, and actually maybe one of the things that I used to do as a kid all the time is draw these sort of banners for projects, you know, the front title page for an assignment, and we'll do that here in a second. Okay, tea time. Oh. So also just a tiny little thing. these last few I've been using like a Crayola pencil, and this is like 12 pencils for $1. And then this is a really nice, who makes these? The Super Color. This is Caran d'Ache. Yeah, yeah, it's really hard to see. Really, and just I probably like. So this pencil is maybe 10 cents, and this pencil is like $2. And there is quite the difference as I'm just shading. I'm really, these last few, I'm able to kind of really blend these things out much softer versus these are, it's just there's a lot more wax in here and just less forgiving, I find. So that's my pitch for using better art materials. But, you know, if you don't have access to them, you can still make it work, and there are plenty of artists who don't have access to really expensive art materials and still manage to make incredible artworks out there. So don't use your materials as an excuse for not making art, or that you can't start an artwork because you don't have the best things money can buy. Okay. So maybe just while I'm here, just a quick little tangent is I love drawing these little banner kind of things. And so to do that is, let's say we were to draw, I won't even really worry about putting the text in here, but you know, we curve it. I used to do these things all the time. Right? So you kind of start with this line, right? And then this. And you always want these to be the same height. Right? So these, this, they're all going to be the same height, and they have the same kind of curve, right? Let's say these ends should be a little higher. So I'll just go over this really quickly. So this is a fun way to, you know, you can use these on like a birthday card that you make, or on some kind of garage sale poster, or your missing cat thing, if you wanted to, you know, make it really elaborate. But this kind of thing is, you know, and you can just add ribbon after, like, let me see if I can just kind of go a little bit nuts here. Let's say we did the same sort of thing. Right, so you could start with this kind of wildness, and then we just kind of build it up and go, okay, I'm just going to replicate that there. This, again, same height. Right, just connecting all of these. So I'll finish this off, and then we'll get back on track and just, I haven't had a chance to draw this kind of stuff in forever. And this, imagine if you'd started doing your doodles like this while you're on hold with the phone company, right? And you just start making crazy banners and just seeing how nuts it is. And if you're able to kind of dig yourself out of a, you could just put a whole bunch of wild lines like this. Can you connect it all and make it function as a banner again? Right, I don't expect you to try drawing this last one, but and then of course you could kind of add a little shading into all of this here, the darker areas. Right, in the same sort of way. You can see just even these little tiny touches of shadow. I'm going very fast, but it all of a sudden helps things pop a little bit. And not only that, it helps make it make a little bit more logical sense. Okay, so let's move on to... what I want to do next. Okay, so I'm just going to we'll spend a few minutes here. Okay, so what we're looking at on screen is a curtain. There's a pillow on the bottom, let's say if you're going fast. And then here's a photograph of a curtain. So I think what we're going to do is we're not going to spend too long. Let's say 10 minutes at most on this. So let's come on. Okay, so on this next page, I'm going to draw these curtains here. So the first thing I'm going to do is just kind of block things in, right? So here's the top of the curtains, and I'm actually going to cram it into the bottom of this page, right? I'm just drawing the shapes, right? Let's say that's going to be where the ties are on the curtain. So you can see I did that pretty quickly, but that would be before I start doing anything. I want to figure out how much space I need for this drawing, right? And I'm not going to follow everything in here. I'm just we can kind of give it a little bit of a rough edge at the top. All right, and then we've got this fabric. It pulls in, right? Because this tie is coming in, it's pulling it, and then it kind of billows out. All right, so we're going to have all of this fabric, all that tension. All right, same thing on this side, all of this fabric. All right. Okay. And if you go really fast, you can draw the pillow right inside here if you want. I'm just gonna... You can see, even as I draw this pillow, I'm just kind of giving it slightly pointier edges. All these kind of lines are kind of pointing towards the inside. All right? Because it would start out with a square piece of fabric, but if you stuff it, right, there's gonna be these tension lines pulling towards the corner, right? Whereas this area is going to have the least amount of tension. Okay, just making sure. Okay. So, like in the image on the left there, so the top of the fabric, you know, it's going to have a little bit of a wave, but it's towards the bottom, we're going to expect to have more waves and for it to be more jagged. So, again, let's say the light is coming from the left again. So we've got light from here. So I just kind of messed that up, didn't I? Right, okay, so. So I'm thinking about like this here is catching the highlight, and then this side's the darker area. So we've got, okay, so obviously you could see on the left is much more of a line-based drawing, and what I'm doing here is taking it and just softening it up a little bit, doing a little bit more of a blending rendering. You can certainly draw like the one on the left. It's that is sort of like what I did with the orange, right? If you want something that's just a little bit kind of softer, right? You know, you can just kind of draw this version here. And then inside of all these, I'm just gonna kind of soften it up with some shadows. Now I know, and I'm also going to give a little bit of a shadow from this casting down onto the fabric, which also kind of helps kind of the shape here. And I know doing some of this stuff is maybe, for some people, not the most exciting use of their drawing time. We're going to do another drawing here shortly, kind of to finish off for the day. But doing these kind of mundane drawings of everyday things, in some way, is easier because the stakes are lower, right? If we were to sit here and say, okay, we're going to draw Captain America or Superman and the folds in his cape right now. There's no folds on Captain America, right? On Superman there is, but it gets a little bit like, oh, I got to draw Superman properly, and if I don't get the arms and the legs in the right proportion and that neck, and then just getting to doing the cape and stuff is a whole other kind of issue, right? And so people often don't even get to practice this kind of thing because they're so worried about getting those other big details sorted out. So that's why practicing kind of this very fundamental, simple kind of thing is really helpful, because you know, there's not really a lot that can go wrong drawing this kind of thing, so we can really play around with the shading a lot more. Also, while you're doing this, you want to create a little bit of variety so that things aren't all the same. You know, like some areas are just going to be a little bit darker than others. Right, and that's kind of really important. Okay. And maybe I'm just going to work on this pillow really quickly, maybe while other people are finishing that. Again, let's say this light's coming from this direction. You can't go wrong with like doing some shading and then adding more over top of it afterwards. So it's not like it disappears and you've just sort of just wasted time. So like down here, let's say I'm going to add more shading over top of it. I'm just going to go over top of some of these lines. And they kind of disappear a little bit and I can bring them back. But don't be afraid to do a little bit of that here. So again, most of that light is hitting from the top. That's why I'm darkening here, because this is our main tension area in the center of the pillow. Okay, well, look at that. Perfect. 10 minutes drawing that pillow and the curtains. Okay, I'll just wait just a couple seconds here before moving on. Maybe while that's happening, I'm going to quickly see if I can find maze. Oh, it was on Facebook. Okay, that's right. Okay. I thought I found all this, didn't I? Okay. Social media, there's so many different... okay, cool. Oh, these are awesome. Okay, great, 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 great. Okay. So maybe I'm just going to take a quick little side detour here, just so I can talk a little bit about May's drawings, since I forgot hers a little bit. I forgot to talk about her work. Okay, so I'm just reading some of her comments. Okay, so here's a drawing that she did. So this is the first one she sent. So this is great. In fact, I really like the way that you did the mouth here and these teeth. I think you did a great job. I would say you want to be careful though with drawing teeth, and when you are doing them, just to ease off a little bit, even if that's the way it looks. I know it sounds kind of funny, but just because it looks that way, you don't necessarily want to draw it so dark. But you did pull it off. I will say you actually did a great job of pulling it off. But often, even when I draw teeth, I'll often leave this as just either a white shape and maybe darkening it in the corners a little bit, and just hinting at some of the gums on here rather than drawing the full teeth, because sometimes it can look a little bit like menacing kind of, it's just the way that our eyes read drawings, unless you spend a lot of time really rendering the rest of it. So I think you did this. I think is the strongest part of the drawing, is the mouth actually. And because it's so dark in there, it makes us expect to see a little bit more darkness elsewhere on the face. So it makes me kind of feel like there should be more shadows around at least one of these eyes, depending on where the light is coming from. Because in this drawing, it's not totally clear where the light is. So part of adding a shadow or shadows is it helps direct our attention as to where the main source of light is coming from. The jaw, fantastic. These eyes are great, although they do feel like they could use a little bit more specific. Like this one is definitely a little bit more specific, like this shape, than even this one. So we want to be really looking carefully at the shape and any kind of little things. Like I feel like we could probably have some eyelashes in here. Again, I feel like a little bit the bridge of the nose on one side and inside of the, this eye socket here. Just like if you're looking at my image right now, like usually one side of the face is getting, in this case, or sorry, this case here, this is getting more shadow, like light, stronger light coming from this side, right? So a little bit of that. And then the other thing is the hair feels a little bit like a big solid mass. And what I would like to see is maybe a little bit more specificity, a little bit more like trying to focus in on a few more specific hairs. Just to kind of, you don't have to draw every one of them, but if you draw like 5 or so, all you would need to do, even on this drawing itself, would be to just go a little bit darker and just darken in a few strands of hair and try to follow kind of how they would go. And I think that would be really helpful, and even just into down here, because right now it's this kind of very soft, dark shape, and I want a little bit more information in there. All around, fantastic job. Even in this neck here, the subtleness of this shadow down here is beautiful. Okay, and then we had this one here, another drawing that May sent in. May also has contributed very generously to the show. So if you're inspired by Janet and May and you'd like to contribute to the show, there's links to the PayPal below where you can send in anything from $1 to $1,000. So thank you very much, Janet and May, for your contributions. I appreciate them. So here, this is another great drawing, May. I think a few things that I think that strike me is the nose. I feel like is a place that needs some work. Otherwise, I think this drawing is pretty much done. So, and I should also, again, I just want to reiterate that I'm talking about things from my own point of view and my own personal style. So there's nothing inherently wrong with any of the drawings we've looked at. It's just like, you're asking me what I would say, like, because I could see you developing a whole cartoon or comic book using this exact same way of drawing a nose, right? Like, this could be a really effective kind of stylistic strategy for drawing a nose like this. Having said that, if you want to make it look maybe a little more quote-unquote realistic, would be to, I think we want to look a little bit more carefully here. Like, I think we're kind of missing the ball part on the front of the nose. So what's happening is it looks a little bit flat. So to help that, even if we put just a few lines right here or some shading to darken this, that would help pop this shape forward, right? Because right now it actually kind of almost looks like it's coming inward, right? And so we want that nose to pop forward. So using a shadow to kind of tell us that it's blocking out some of the light is going to help push that forward. So I think this just needs to be a little bit darker right around here. And then a little bit darker maybe right up around from this eye here. And you can even suggest a tiny bit of shadow there. Otherwise, it looks great. I actually really like the way that you've done this kind of the facial hair. Turned out really well. The hair, I think you've done an even better job this time around. I think this is the second drawing you sent, right? So you're getting better and better every time. All right, better, the more specific hair. This is great. You know, even like there's just the way that the softness of the beard here actually works really well, because, you know, like I've had beards before and there's just, it sort of kind of tapers out a little bit, unless you're shaving and making a distinct line all the time, it kind of tapers out. So that actually looks really effective right here. Super effective right there. Maybe less effective right here. So because I think we'd expect to see maybe more of these defined hairs like you've got elsewhere. So it works in here really well, because you can see. So the difference is you're using that same style of mark making for here that works really well, brilliant. But when it's applied here, looks a little. This needs to be like a harder edge for these hairs, and this up here. Right, I feel like these hairs would be a little bit more solid. But that's, again, next class we're going to talk about how to use different types of mark making for different scenarios. And there's certain kinds of marks that work really well for drawing skin and hair that work less effectively if we're drawing glass or wood or plastic. So we can, just by using a slightly different technique, create the difference between a skin and a piece of you know, a leather glove, right? So you can have somebody wearing a leather glove holding a metal ball bearing, and they're all going to be different textures, and we see a little bit of the arm, right? So this is great. Great job, May. Thank you for sending these in, and I really wanted to make sure we got to them now. That's why I'm just shifting quickly to get to that. Okay, so here's another curtain if you wanted to draw that. This is a little bit of example of some stuff we'll talk about next class. So let's do a little bit of drawing of some clothing to kind of, and then we'll do one final drawing, I think, for today. So let's say we want to draw, I'm going to draw both of these shirts, and let's say I'm going to give myself 10 minutes to do that. So, I'm going to draw these sweaters on the top of the on the top of the screen to the right there. So let's bring this down. Oops. Okay. So how do I do these two sweaters at the very top? So the first thing is I'm just going to get their shape in here. So I'm even going to just divide it in half. So we got this top part of the sweater, and then we've got this bottom part of the sweater. All right, and then kind of arms. All right. So this is what I would do before I do anything else, is just sort of try to identify this basic shape. I guess maybe that's pretty, I've had people say I'm drawing too lightly, so I'm just going to go over top of this so you can see. Right, so, and maybe I'll do the same thing on this other side too, so. Right, so you can see a little more, might be a little easier for you to see why I did this kind of oval shape here when I'm drawing the back side. Okay. So, let me see. Let's going to take a pencil. And let's kind of get a little more specific now. And this has got a kind of a nice flowy outline. Again, one of the big things with fabric is noticing which piece of fabric is in front of the other, right? So here, what I'm doing is putting this chest part of the fabric in front of this arm. Okay. So I'm just really, this is kind of a quick sketch here of just some fabric, and you can see I'm not really obeying a lot of what's happening in the original even just yet, but it just, I want to be able to get this onto the page. All right, once we've got this kind of generic kind of thing, then we can get more specific with adding some shadows in here. All right, so let's say this is the back side. And, you know, the light is coming from up here. All right, so this area here is going to get darker inside. Let's just make that darker here. All right, as we come down into the shirt, just kind of imagining that there's these folds on top of folds. You see kind of what I'm doing. I wonder if I can recreate this here. There's often kind of like folds kind of trade off from one another. Can I do that? How is this? We have, let's say, one here. Like often a fold will, you know, you kind of have these interlocking kind of shapes like this, right? So what I'm doing is illustrating, let's say, this and this and this, all right, so that we get these kind of I'm really not even looking at the screen right now. I'm just sort of inventing things a little bit. Also because I've worn these a billion times, and I could probably see these kind of sweaters in my sleep. So I'm thinking where the light is, and then I'm trying to kind of anticipate, let's say this is kind of bulging out, then the light's going to hit here and give a little shadow underneath. And wherever that is, it's going to create, just like I did with the cloth, kind of cascading effect of fabric folding and folding on top of itself. It's almost like zebra stripes or something. I'm trying to think of what this reminds me of doing. All right. And I try to want to vary this up a little bit so they don't all look the same, right? Because fabric isn't going to play nicely, right? So we don't want it to all look like this, like almost like a pattern on the clothes. We want it to kind of change a little bit. Okay, so let's do this, the back side of this sweater. I like to use a kind of a dotted line to suggest like a seam or stitching. And again, I'm going to think of this light coming from this side, so that's why it's going to be darker. So the highlights are going to be here, and the shadows are going to be on this side, which is going to be a little bit different than the original image. Well, I guess it's a pair of pants, but I'm just gonna pretend it's part of the sweater and these sleeves. Okay. So we're thinking about that fabric kind of hanging on, like as if we had pins on it, right? So if there's pins on the top, right, where the shoulders would be, everything is kind of hanging down and pulling on that, right? Wow, is that 10 minutes already? Okay. So we would expect that fabric to kind of pull down, right? And then we might have some of these V shapes here. There are some people that have written great, if you really want to geek out on folds and shadows, there's plenty of artists who've written books on because like basically a kind of a science of the fold, right? You could kind of anticipate, you know, the fold or the how what the body looks like inside of folds. If we kind of, you know, we could kind of reconstruct, you you know, just like we did when we drew the foot inside of the shoe a few weeks ago. Like some people get really obsessed with it, and then some people don't care at all. But you could see how it just adds a level of believability and realism to an artwork when we've got a little bit of folds in here. Okay, I'm gonna finish this off in just a couple of seconds. Again, this is just from my imagination, so you know, I'm sure maybe there's somebody who is obsessed with folds just watching this right now, just losing their mind at. But again, I'm not concerned so much of. I really don't care about perfection. I'm interested in believability. Like, and then I move on, right? Does it look right? Can somebody believe that this is a sweater or a piece of fabric? If they can, then boom, job done. What's next? Right? It's almost a little bit like the Pictionary, right? You're just like, I just need people to be able to guess that this is a horse. And if they can guess it's a horse, then what's the point of adding more and more detail? Like, why am I doing this, I guess would be the question. All right, so you can see here as I start adding a little bit, going a little bit darker. Once I kind of feel like I've got things in place and I'm pretty satisfied, I can kind of go back even on to this other drawing here and just fill it in a bit more. One thing that drives me crazy about these sweaters, as soon as you wash them, the zipper gets all kind of funny and they never kind of lay flat, and every time you're wearing them, it always looks like you got this giant belly. Anyway. Okay. So, you know, I'm just going to spend, let's say, another 30 seconds on this, and then we'll do one final drawing today. You know, I've got some emails from people saying that they watch the class, and then they take a break halfway through, and then the next day they do the second half of the class. So if maybe for some of you, I know for some of you 2 hours is quite a long time to sit still and to draw. So, you know, these things are recorded and put up there on the web, and you can watch them at your leisure and no pressure. My computer's saying I got 9 minutes of storage left. Wow, it's time, it flies. My goodness. Maybe that is enough for today. On underneath here is another. We are going to do a whole episode. Maybe I'll leave these up here while I'm just chatting. We are going to do a whole episode on clothing on figures. So we'll talk about, like, you know, we'll draw some people from photographs wearing clothes, and we'll go into it a little bit more in depth. A lot more in depth than we did today. Today was kind of the introduction to this whole kind of idea of folds and fabrics. So even if, I think if you just did this, that would be great. In fact, we'll talk about doing these t-shirts at the beginning of the next class that we do. I think that's the clothed figures is this time next week. Okay. So again, you could see my drawings looks, let's just scroll this down here. Like not too, it doesn't look very similar to the image here on the computer, but that's all right, right? If you take a look, if you want to play around and draw some fabrics and clothing over the course of the next few weeks, don't get stuck on trying to make it look exactly like the photograph. Let me see. So I'm just going to move that there. Okay. Since we've been recording for quite a while now, and I think everybody, I had a couple slices of pizza right before we began because I was like, oh, when we start doing this stuff, I get into it and I get carried away. But I bet you there's some other people like, oh, please, let's just cut it here. Let's end for today because I'm exhausted. Okay, so next class, we're going to be talking about drawing different textures and how to differentiate glass and plastic and wood and any other kinds of things from one another, and how we can do that just with our humble pencil. And that is really satisfying because let's say we want to put a person's face in here, but rather than a human being, we want it to be some kind of android with a metallic skin, for instance. How would we, and then we draw a real person wearing this, because maybe they're in disguise. We have a real person wearing this or similar sweater and this metallic android figure wearing this sweater, and they both have humanoid feet. They look the same except the skin is different. How would we create that difference? Right? Well, that's what the next class is all about. This is using your pencil to create different kinds of marks to indicate different types of materials and textures. So, thank you everybody for tuning in. If you found this helpful, please like and subscribe to the channel. Hit that little notification bell. Let your friends know. Even if it's just like you're like, some of the episodes weren't helpful for me, but hey, look at this one. The one where we're drawing the fabric, that's clicked a whole bunch of things off for me. Share it with your friends. If you want to make a small contribution via PayPal, there's a link down below. Any donation is gladly appreciated. And thank you to all of those. I know there's many people who've contributed money, and I think I need to make like a sign or something back here saying thank you, because it doesn't feel enough just to put it in the description or whatever. So I'll think about that, and yeah, enjoy the rest of your week or weekend, depending on how that what part of the week you're in. You know, some people go to work on Friday and their weekend is Wednesday and Thursday or something, right? Anyway, I'm just rambling. And anyway, have yourselves a wonderful rest of your afternoon, morning, and we will see you same time, same place on Tuesday. Bye-bye, everybody.